Hello, my name is Bret Holmes. I have a business called Crow Mentoring. I've been working with kids for over 20 years, mostly young men, teenaged men, and I thought it would be fun to put together a video series of a bunch of questions and get different people's responses. The idea came to me because my grandfather put together a bunch of videos he had recorded reminiscing about old stories, and I wish I could have gone back and asked him some specific questions, so I thought it would be a nice online resource. Okay, this is Crow Mentoring with 12 questions, and I'm going to be the first one. I'm going to be the guinea pig here. Hi, I'm Bret Holmes. I'm 44 years old, and I've been working with kids for 20 years, mostly teenage boys and in different settings, one-on-one, school settings. For me, I think the main rite of passage was being accepted by my father as a peer, and I think that was something that happened very gradually, but I think the real tipping point for that was when I became a father myself and really felt the weight of those responsibilities. Always before, I kind of felt I had all the good ideas about parenting and what it took to be a parent, but it was kind of like watching a poker game rather than sitting down at the table and anteing up. So I would say that becoming a father was the main rite of passage for me. For me, I wasn't raised very religious, but I was raised very spiritually, and I have a very close connection to nature, and that was where spirituality always lived for me. So I was very close to nature as a kid, and I kind of find that closeness in nature when I need to connect. When I talk to my daughter, we talk about the physical world and the spiritual world, and I always say that the forest is the place where those two worlds live together and coexist. So, well, I think the ideals of freedom are a very powerful force in humanity. I think it's the deepest yearning for a person is to feel freedom and feel free. But I feel like that freedom is the other side of that coin is responsibility. And by accepting and assuming responsibilities, there's a deeper sense of freedom within that. And I think that maybe in the American dream of freedom, I think that responsibility part got a little brushed aside. So it'd be nice to have like a Bill of Rights and a Bill of Responsibilities. Well, I've looked into this a bunch, and I think back to Lakota Indians. I've studied them mostly, and a warrior is someone who would give up his own maybe vanity or his comfort for the good of the greater community. A person who would give, if they had extra, would give to those who had the least. One of the ways the Lakota men knew they proved their manhood was to give away everything they had and start from nothing, just to show how capable of a person they were, that they could start from absolutely nothing and start over again. And they were that adept at doing what they needed to do and acquiring what they needed. And so a warrior for me is someone who has a code of honor and a courageousness to live up to the ideals they have. For me, I think of nonviolent direct action, which means standing up for your principles and standing up to injustice. But I believe in holistic self-defense, which means if you are being attacked, you need to defend yourself, and you need to defend those you love and care about, and defend your ideals and principles. So I don't think being completely passive is the answer, but I don't think aggressive violence is the answer either. First, I would say one of my grandfathers he was a really big role model. He was an Eagle Scout. He was in the Navy. He was in Iwo Jima and Tarawa. He was one of the first boats in the harbor about to invade Japan. And he was also an English teacher for 40 years. He just did everything with a humility. he lived through the Depression, so he just valued everything he had and took very good care of it. He would challenge me in a very loving way and hold me to high standards without demeaning and even as he died, which was, kind of a long process, he did it with such dignity and grace that I just hope that I can die in the same way, with the same sort of presence and courage. Another role model, I'm a big fan of Chief Joseph, who's a Nez Perce Indian who, in the sense of a warrior, really did everything for his tribe and really tried to maintain peace in the Wallowa Valley of Oregon, and was pushed beyond what he could endure, watching his people being cheated and violated violently and aggressively. And so I thought he represented a really the highest ideals of the American warrior, were wanting peace but not compromising when his principles were pushed too far. And I have a lot of musical role models, or people I think used art as a way of being a warrior of consciousness. And I think a good example of that I'd say a guy like John Lennon, who used art to raise awareness and used his position of notoriety to draw attention to issues he thought were bigger than himself. That's a subject that I think is on a lot of people's minds, and for me it comes down to, it's the most powerful way you can affect the planet, by procreating with another human being. And if you are not prepared to do that, you really shouldn't. And you should make sure that when you do consider that, you pick a really good mother, and the traits of a mother that you'd be really excited to have your child learn from. And just, there's a pleasure aspect to it, but there's a huge responsibility with it, and I think just don't let that responsibility slip from your mind. My dad was pretty much the quintessential strong and silent type. He was in the Special Forces. He was a Green Beret, so I never really saw him sad or angry. He was very stoic. And so it was kind of, I kind of intuitively knew I just didn't really want to upset him. And so I kind of kept the relationship good the best I could, even though when I was 14, admittedly, I was a total punk. And I was learning a lot of lessons the hard way. So I would say it's the relationship kind of broke through as I became a father, and when I played in his bagpipe band, I played bass drums and he plays bagpipes. So I had this moment of making music with him, and that was a really profound moment for me. And I felt like I was walking more of an equal rather than someone who I looked up to and had a lot of reverence, but also a little bit of fear about. Well, I have 2 daughters, and I want them to see me as a person who was as present as I could be, as authentic as I could be, and as available, and also someone who was just human and made mistakes but owned up to them, and then also never gave up. So, well, I heard a quote once that I really liked, that it's one thing to want notoriety and it's another thing to want a legacy, and a legacy is something that outlives notoriety tenfold. So I would like to be remembered as someone who really thought about the 7th generation. Everything I did hopefully would affect that generation positively in some way. So I would say, someone who really thought about generations much further down the line that I'll never see and I'll never know, but hopefully I will have contributed to that. I think that I would say that there is a war going on, and the war is in your heart, in your mind and out in the world. And it's about appreciating life, a reverence for life, and an authentic character, an authentic movement in the world, standing up for what's right, and holding true to your ideals and your principles, no matter what. Thanks a lot. All right, I'm Bret Holmes. That was Crow Mentoring 12 questions and man-to-man, and let me know what you think down there in the subscriptions or the comments. Thank you.